because we've had these experiences, and they're just things that's like, gosh, I wish I had known in my 20s the things that I know now.
They're really hitting the top of the game. The CEOs are in the succession are becoming the CEOs.
This is the adult reality of making hard choices.
And some of that is you learn by trying. Like, there's just no other way to do it.
And you just keep moving, and you just keep moving. Just keep moving.
Yeah. You do your best, but once you know better, you do better.
Instead of looking at things that were worse, things that were better, it was like I was blown away at my staff. I'm like, oh, I thought they couldn't do anything without me there.
When something keeps happening over and over again, you can think it must be them, but you have to take on that it's you.
Now, when I've said that to entrepreneurial groups, they all get nervous. Oh, I could never do that. I could never do that.
Oh, this is like a whole new way of looking at this situation and a whole skill set.
And we're not in this alone.
And we are not alone, because you have Katina Sawyer and I here today to talk about Katina Sawyer's new book here on Bestseller Live. She is a co-founder of Workr Beeing, and she's co-author of Leading for Wellness, How to Create a Team Culture Where Everyone Can Thrive. She's an associate professor of management and organizations in Eller College of Management at the University of Arizona. She's published over 50 peer-reviewed research articles and chapters, and in places like Harvard Business Review. She's won career research and teaching awards. And so she's got grants from the National Science Foundation, top 40 under 40 by the Philadelphia Business Journal. So we know Katina is got something to say, and she is going to help us today. Katina, welcome.
Thank you so much. And actually, I'll just, it's Katina, just so you know.
I'm sorry.
It's very, well, the R is tricky, and some days I want to call myself Katrina, so it's okay.
Well, and you know what? I have problems with the English language. So, so.
But that's a very nice introduction. I mean, this, that was a very nice setup. So thank you for that.
Yeah, we were both running a little bit late today, and so I was running to get into it. So I apologize.
Yeah, no problem at all.
So let's talk about the book, Leading for Wellness. It introduces this concept of becoming a generator. What does that mean?
Yeah, so generator leaders are the type of leaders that people think they're going to become when most people think they're going to become when they start off on their leadership journey. Most people want to be a great leader, and they're the leaders that people want to work for, and they're the leaders that organizations want to hire. Basically, they're exemplary leaders who boost results and deliver from a productivity perspective with their teams and themselves. But they also are people that folks look back on and say, I absolutely loved working for that person.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So the book it's based on a couple of in-depth studies.
Yes.
What did you learn in those studies? What was surprising? What was unexpected? Tell us some stories.
Yeah, sure. So my co-founder, Dr. Patricia Gorbarek, and I started Workr Beeing with the quest to bring the science of workplace wellness to employees everywhere. We're both PhDs in industrial organizational psychology, and we knew that there was tons of great science out there that could help employees to live happier and healthier work lives that would also have positive downstream implications for organizations, but that science was not really getting into the public in the way that we had wished it would, or that maybe we had idealistically thought it could when we were graduate students. And so as we thought through, ways in which we might bring science to the public, we started, different mechanisms for communication, blog and a podcast, and these sorts of ways to get the word out. And that created some response from folks who were interested in learning more about how they could create happier and healthier workplaces. And one of the things that we found that the research really hadn't tackled yet was a real roadmap for leaders to understand how, specifically how behaviorally to become these leaders. We understand that when employees do more mindfulness, or when they're in a work environment that's supportive, or they have colleagues who they find helpful, all of those things help, right? And we know that from the research that that's true. But when you want to actually create an environment and a team culture where people are thriving, what people really wanted from us was like, what are the 5 things that I should do differently than what I'm doing today? And the research really hadn't created that. It was not synthesized in a way that actually created that roadmap. And so we decided, well, if the literature right now doesn't have that, we're researchers, we know how to do studies and conduct experiments and survey design and all that kind of stuff. So why don't we do our own research on this area to help to answer these unanswered questions that we couldn't find in the literature on our own? And so we conducted 2 studies. One was an in-depth interview study. The other was a survey study to basically get a sense of what do employees mean, first of all, when they say they want to be in a workplace that supports their wellness. And then also, who is out there who's had a leader? We didn't really want to focus so much on the downsides, like let's find the bad leaders and learn what not to do. Although we have some of that in the book. What we really wanted to do was find people who were proactively being awesome at this and say, well, let's learn how to be awesome. Like, what are the proactive things we can do to be known for being particularly good, not just like not being bad. Right. And so when we started to get into this and interviewing people and asking them these questions, not only did we figure out what do people mean when they say they want their wellness to be supported, but we also figured out like, what are the key behaviors that are inherent in cultivating those feelings? And then how do people feel that impacted their work and their lives from an outcomes perspective? What might organizations expect to happen to these employees who can benefit from these leaders?
What I was really interested in the book, what caught my attention is you talk about the tone leaders set rather than the time they spend. What do you mean? Like, I think that's a fascinating part.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think we talk a lot in the book about this idea of ideal worker norms, and that's not our concept. That's a concept that comes from decades of research about how people's expectations for what employees and leaders should be doing and what leadership looks like have sort of gotten cultivated and passed down in organizations. And one of the strongest pieces of those ideal worker norms is this sense that the time that you spend at work is the best metric for determining whether or not you're a hard worker or you're doing a good job, right? Yeah. And we've sort of inherited these norms, whether we agree with them or not. They sort of seep into what we do and create these, odd behaviors, these like kind of showboaty behaviors of like, yes, I'm the one who sent the email at 10 p.m. when all the rest of you might have not been doing work. I was the one working, right? So these ideal worker norms kind of seep into.
And we reward that. We reward that behavior. Right?
Yes, exactly. Because we've all kind of bought into this idea that the time is really what is showing that you're the most productive. And what these leaders do is they say, it's really not about time. It's about how well you use the time that you put in, but it's also really about the quality and how you're doing things that matters more. And from a leadership perspective, this has to do with creating a culture that does 2 things. One, it boosts up employees to create a positive work environment that then provokes and spurs more productivity. But it also does something else, which is it saves the leader time themselves so they can focus on other priorities. Because when you create these positive work environments, people become more self-sufficient. They solve problems on their own instead of running to you with every little thing because they're scared of how you might react to their solution compared to a solution you might come up with. And they also are more likely to help one another because they have these positive relational bonds. So instead of everybody running to the leader saying, fix my problem, fix my problem, fix my problem, they're taking initiative to fix problems themselves, and their neighbors turning to them and saying, well, let me help you fix this problem. So this kind of shift in focus from time to tone actually ends up creating more time, which is maybe a bit of a counterintuitive mentality.
That's I think that's so true. And I see, I've had that same conversation. I work with a lot of executive teams, and we've talked about this issue about time versus sort of the quality of the work and the output and the productivity. And those often aren't the same,
Yes.
Talk about a little. Explain to me. There's usually, you talk about a common mismatch between how employees and employers define wellness. I'm interested in that.
Yeah. So I think that a lot of the wellness industry has cropped up from sort of like a partial scientific, partial pseudoscientific, partially, just like marketing and what sticks, Instagrammy type, social media trends. And so what's happened is that companies and employees understand that paying attention to more than just like output all the time is good. Like most people believe that if their employees are going to burn out, they're going to get poorer results. But they dedicate these wellness budgets, right? And we were talking to a lot of people who have these wellness budgets attached to their jobs. And the problem is like the sentiment is there, like, yes, this is important, but the execution is unclear in terms of what's the best way for us to spend these dollars? What's the best way for us to focus? And so what we see is there's kind of like a spaghetti on the wall approach where they're like, I don't know, maybe my employees would like to go to yoga at lunch. Maybe my employees would like a course on nutritious eating. Maybe we do a ropes course. And they're kind of just like spaghetti at the walling these things and not necessarily taking a more systematic approach to understanding what's going to work. And so when employees think about wellness in their companies, they often talk to us about programs, initiatives, things that a step challenge, but when we ask them, what do you actually want? What do you think would actually work? Because the burnout issue continues despite increasing amounts of money being spent on these initiatives. What would actually work? They really got us down to basics. I want my day-to-day work to support my needs from the perspective of, I feel like I have a challenging but not completely overwhelming amount of work to do. And I also want to feel like I'm seen as a whole person who has a life outside of work, and that's okay and that's supported. So we heard people talking about wanting to have their physical health supported. That's both with regard to, I would like to be able to have time to go for a run. But it's also, I'm grappling with an illness, and I think that my employer will deal with it in a way that allows me to have some flexibility so I can still continue doing my job, but I might need to flip things around a little bit in the way I do it. Emotional health and mental health, psychologically, do I feel safe on my team? Do I feel like if I'm struggling with something, I can bring that up and find solutions? Do I feel like I can express a wide range of emotions on the job? Yes, we can feel positively and happy, but if I'm upset about something or if I'm worried about something, can we also surface and deal with those emotions? And then the last piece is really around this work-life balance, right? Like, am I able to achieve, proper boundaries between my work and life? And they were kind of saying like, the programs are okay. And it's not that they're bad or they're doing something negative to me. However, when my basic job sucks, then these programs are kind of like a Band-Aid on a bullet hole, right? It's like, I need something to change the root of the problem.
That was a great segue. One of my favorite people in the world and one of my favorite books, and it's a way sort of I've taken to designing my own life and my own work. So a book by Aisha Bursell called Design the Life That You Love.
Mm-hmm.
And when you started talking about that, you talk about crafting work to support life, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a really, really, really good way to frame that. Talk about that. Are there some practical ways that, we as managers and leaders can help our teams? I don't know if it's thinking about completely rehauling the way we think about work and life, but talk about that a little bit, because that's a discussion that we're not having. I don't think.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure.
Frame it really well.
Yeah, thanks. So that was something that was very interesting to us about all of these stories that we gathered and analyzed about these exemplary leaders. That something that they did that I thought was just so fascinating was they asked people what their life commitments and life goals were first, and then thought about how they could help employees to make sure that their work life actually supported their ability to take part in these other activities. And I thought that was so fascinating because, for me personally, you're really thinking about how do we, create workplaces where folks are, feeling empowered to go for that run or, go to that doctor's appointment if you have to during the day. But a lot of the time, the way that people think about it is we'll squeeze it in between this other stuff. And the stuff that we have on your work calendar is always taking precedence over so of course we want you to do that if you can squeeze it in, right? And the squeezing it in part is what makes people feel out of balance because they're running from one thing to another. There's this inherent idea that, this is always going to be more important than that. Of course, in the book, we talk about, if you have a huge client presentation that's been planned for, a week and it's noon and you're like, I think I'm just going to go for this run and who cares if I'm late? No, we're not talking about that. There are still norms for professionalism that we want to uphold. But if you say, I have to leave at 3:30 every day to pick up my kids from school. And that's very important for me to be able to do that. And for our family that I take on that responsibility. And it's like, 3:25, and every time your boss is like, well, do you just have 15 more minutes, or putting time over that, you have to remind that person, or you start to get the sense that they don't actually want you to do it. Like, it's not that they said you can't. But so these folks, what they really try to do is, whenever possible, although it's not possible 100% of the time, but whenever possible, they try to make sure that they're aware of what life commitments are really important to their employees, and they map those out before they do things like setting a standing meeting for their one-on-one. Like, I'm not going to block that during this time that's important to you if you've communicated to me that that's a time that should be off limits.
Yeah, no, I like that. And talk about, if you're able to do that as a leader, talk about the engagement going up and
yes,
and turnover. I mean, it just changes the equation.
Yes, absolutely. We actually have a great story in the book of a person who shared about his workplace culture, and that at the start of they had their standing meetings on like Monday mid-morning. They're like all hands meetings. And at the start of every meeting, the senior most leaders would share what they had done over the weekend. And it was always, we went to this great concert, or my kids and I went to this like really fun baseball game, or a friend of mine and I went hiking. And they talked about that, and they encouraged other people to share what they did over the weekend. And he said just that little action of like, hey, we all took our weekend to disconnect, just made the company culture so much freer, and everybody like breathed a sigh of relief. You don't have to be pretending, contrasted with leaders who we heard about who would brag about how little sleep they get. Oh, I only get 3 hours of sleep a night, or 4 hours of sleep a night, as if this was like a trophy, right?
Right. That's a problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Not a good thing.
Yes.
So, we all know, and you're in this business, and so am I, and I can read the reports, but I can also just say, from working in a bunch of different companies, morale is really suffering. Right. It's such a hard thing. What can people do? I mean, what can leaders do now to boost morale? I mean, I think we're all trying to figure out, how can we help our teams feel better? I've got a new book coming out this year about team talk, and in the research for that, the leader's self-talk actually impacts the way the team feels.
Yeah.
The way the team performs. So and it affects morale. And
yeah.
So I'm so curious about, from your perspective, what can we do to help morale, or to make it a little bit better?
Wonderful question. And yes, I mean, that sounds fascinating. First of all, I'll be very excited to read your book. But the morale issue is really, the morale issue is really what I think brings a lot of us who care about workplace wellness to the table, that like, the more people have done, somehow the worse things are getting. And it's just a very confusing equation. So what's happening is we're missing the mark. Like, the actions that people are taking are just not quite working. One of the things that we highlight in the book that I think is very valuable for leaders to think about is this idea of being authentic and vulnerable with your team. So if you're concerned about team morale, like you're seeing that morale is low, a really simple way to deal with that is to say, I'm noticing these things. I'm noticing that people seem burnout. I'm noticing that people are emotionally more negative on the team. I'm not mad. I actually want to solve for this problem. Let's talk. Let's have a conversation about what's going on. And also, I'm not going to be mad about whatever you raise, right? I actually want to honestly know. And part of what helps people to know that you're not lying when you say that is if you share something authentically that you're struggling with, something that you're finding challenging to cope with, something that is burning you out, right, at work. Like, something I noticed is that, every weekend I feel like I have more work to do than I could do during the week. And so I've started using Sundays to catch up on work. And that feels like now I only have one real day to disconnect. And so sharing vulnerably and authentically with the team feels funky to people, because they have also digested and bought into this idea of the ideal leader norm is the person who always has the answers and never struggles and always has it down pat. And when they say, like, I'm struggling too, here's what I'm struggling with, what are you struggling with, and how can we make it better? That actually helps people to know that their leader doesn't have it all together. It also helps them to feel like they could be a leader someday, because when they look at their leader and think that this is like a superhuman person who, you know, they could not resonate with or strive to be, then they kind of give up on their leadership aspirations a little bit, because, you know, I don't know if I can hack it doing what this person's doing, or I don't know if I want to hack it doing what this person's doing. So it also helps to boost people's aspirations to stay with the company and to want to grow and develop.
Katina, I could sit here and talk about this stuff all day. This is really, really good. Where can people find the book?
Yeah, so you can get the book at any major bookseller, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books Million, bookstore.org, but you can also just go to our website, Workr Beeing, WORKRBEEING.com/book, and find any of the links to purchasing the book there.
Well, that is, we'll definitely put that in the show when we're live, and that so people can get to it easily. The book is called Leading for Wellness. Learn how to become a generator.
Yes.
And actually lead your team to better wellness. The book, again, called Leading for Wellness. Take a look at it. Dr. Katina Sawyer, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. This was fun.
Thank you.